Knees over toes has become quite the hot topic as of late. And like most trends, people see how extreme they can go with something without first understanding the underlying principles behind it. Broadly speaking, I would say knees over toes is good for your structure and your longevity, but that's not to say that there isn't variables we should account for. So in this video, we're gonna break down what some of these variables are, the do's and the don'ts to knees over toes, as well as some exercises you can employ to improve your integrated range of motion, both at your knee and your ankle. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So one of the first things that we want to look at when it comes to training knees over toes is the dimensions of our structure, because the shape of my structure is going to be very different than yours, which is going to be very different to the next person. So if we take these sticks, which are a very accurate depiction of our skeletal structure, and I take my femur up top here, which will be this stick, and my tibia right underneath, if my femur is significantly longer than my tibia and I start to bend my knee like so, the likelihood of me getting an increased shin angle or a greater angle at my ankle is going to be significantly increased due to the dimensions of these two bones. But if I were to switch these, say my femurs aren't so long and I tend to have a longer tibia, when I go to bend and I create that same angle, you can see it's substantially less. So now my knee isn't tracking nearly as much on top of my foot. And if we also take into account the variable of foot size, that is also going to be another aspect of our structure that plays a part. So not only do the length of our femurs, our tibias, but also our feet are going to play a role in how far it's actually going to track over. Like I said, it is going to be different from person to person. So how one person does it doesn't necessarily mean that is the exact range that you are going to get as well. Alrighty, so now that we are looking at our structure a little bit differently, what we want to start to do is see how we can actually begin to increase this range of motion, specifically at the ankle joint and the relationship between my foot and my knee. So one of the functions that is going to apply a lot to this range of motion with our knee tracking over is going to be dorsiflexion, because that is going to be what we are going to be increasing at the ankle joint specifically. So what we're going to start with is, instead of doing a passive mobilization where I'd kind of just come, we'll say, into this position, and I just take this forward, I hang out, and kind of, we'll say, move my ankle joint around. What we're going to do instead is we're going to try to do a little bit of a release through our anterior tibs. So easiest way to spot this is if you come onto your tibia, which is like right at the midpoint here, and I take my toes up, you're going to feel a little bit of musculature kind of come out of that part of your shin, and that is more or less your anterior tibs. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to do kind of like a technique where I take my fingers like so, and I just kind of cup it, and I'm just going to kind of work side to side in there. You can work this the entire way down. For me, these tend to be a little bit more of my sensitive points. You can also do this with a roller. So if I have a roller this way, I lost my stick, so I'll pretend I'm using this. I can kind of go and roll that up and down this way. You can do this with a lacrosse ball on the ground, but I do find this angle to be a little bit better in terms of opening up that tissue. And once we have that a little bit more mobilized, there's a little bit more hydration in through there, our dorsiflexion is going to be a little bit more increased, which is going to allow us to go through our next exercises with a little bit more ease. All right, so for the next technique, you're going to need a ledge of some sort. This can be on a root system, kind of as you see me here. It can be on a stair, just anything that allows you to get kind of your front foot, the kind of first like 25% of the foot off that ledge. And what we're going to start with is essentially just doing kind of an active dorsiflexion. So all I'm going to do is take that front foot off, and then I'm just going to dorsiflex my ankle initially. And all we're doing here is just getting the anterior tibs really just primed for the movement that we're about to go through. I'd work maybe about 5 to 8 repetitions here, just allowing the ankle to go through its full range of motion. And then what we're gonna start to do is you're gonna start to utilize that dorsiflexion to take yourself slowly down into a squat. So as I'm coming down, I'm just gently dorsiflexing the ankle, and that is going to allow my knee to slowly begin to track over the front foot. And this is a very active way for us to begin to potentiate tension, not only around the knee, but also around the ankle, and start to kind of build a congruence between these two systems. Ideally, when I'm trying to create mobility at a joint, I'm not doing so passively. We're always trying to look for an active way of doing it. And what you can see here is an active way for us to begin to increase that range between the relationship of our knee and our foot. I would work anywhere between about 12 to 15 repetitions here, so quite a bit of volume. And by the end of that, you should definitely feel the anterior tibs are pretty much on fire, and you should feel like you increase that range of motion between the ankle and the knee a little bit. So for our last technique, we're gonna work through a shin angle lunge. This is gonna work in 3 different parts, so you can kind of choose where your starting point is. So what I'm gonna do to initially start with is we're gonna come into a split stance position. And what we're gonna work on initially is just bringing some weight to the forefoot, so to my toes. And as I do that, I'm just gonna start to bend my knee. So you can see here how I'm stacked right on top of my ankle to start with. And all I want you to do is imagine that you're pressing your toes down, lifting this right heel, and then I'm going to bring that right knee forward. I'm gonna drop my heel, and I'm right back to my starting position. So for now, this might be your starting position. You might feel tension kind of get created through the calf. And all we're trying to do here is kind of take some of that tension from the anterior tibs that we were working on before, and we're just building on that range from the squat. Now once I kind of get the gist of this, what we can begin to move this into is just increasing the range. So again, this probably isn't your starting point. What I would encourage you to do is practice going here for maybe like 2 weeks. Do that a couple times a week, kind of as a precursor to your workout or your training routine. And then what I can do is I can start to increase that range a little bit more. And you can see my hips are coming along for the ride with that. We want to think about how these systems link with one another. I don't just want to focus just on the knee and my toe, but also how does my hip relate to that? Because when my knee is going into this position, we want our pelvis to be in an advantageous position as well, so that we're linking multiple systems with one another. Now once you get used to all of that, what you can do is grab a kettlebell, a dumbbell, I'm using a rock, and we're gonna start to apply a little bit of a rhythm. So now, if I just swing and create my rhythm here, what I can begin to do is when this comes back, my knee is gonna come forward. So now we're getting a little bit of an oppositional motion. I'm also starting to link a little bit of rotation in my upper body. And I can feel everything, honestly, on both sides really start to fire up from that. So my quads, right down to my tibs, are all linking to that, and we're doing so around a rhythmic motion, which if you have been around the channel for a little bit, then you're gonna know the importance of rhythm in movement, because ideally we have this baseline of tension and mobility, but it is all functioning around a rhythm, as that allows us to kind of effortlessly and harmoniously just move through space, which is kind of at the crux of functional movement. As well as if you're an athlete or you do sports, there is always going to be some type of rhythm involved. So the more that you can apply that to your training, the more it is going to translate in a practical application as well. So those are just a few exercises to many different applications to training knees over toes. As I said before, there isn't going to be a one size fits all, and you're going to want to think about the relationship between these different joints and not just isolate 2 of them or even 3 of them. You want to think about how the entire system links together. Now, that's not to say that isolated mobilization training isn't important. It is based on your starting point. So assess to see what your starting point is, and then you can just gradually build up from there. Anyways, that's all for the video today. If you guys liked it, like it, subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future. Until next time, make sure you are prioritizing and then you are optimizing for you. I will catch you guys in the next one. We'll see you then. Peace.